Good evening. Well, let me begin by first acknowledging the traditional owners of the unceded land on which the gallery stands here on the banks of the Maiwa, a gathering and low crossing point, an enduring place of trade and exchange. I recognise the Turrbal, Yuggera and Yugara peoples as the first to gather and meet here, the first makers and storytellers to dream here, and recognise their elders past, present and emerging. In the spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge the vital contribution First Nations Australians make to the custodianship of country and the strength of culture within our shared creative community. Good evening again. I'm Chris Sains, Director of Quagoma, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to a very special edition of Perspectives Asia. Perspectives Asia is a long-standing partnership between the Griffith Asia Institute at Griffith University and the Australian Centre for Asia-Pacific Art here at Quagoma. It's a relationship we very greatly value and one that resonates strongly with the gallery's flagship project, the Asia-Pacific Triennial of Contemporary Art, or APT, the 11th edition of which opens in late November this year. I would like to acknowledge and thank Associate Professor Gloria Gur, Deputy Director, Griffith Asia Institute, and the team at the Institute for their ongoing support, guidance and friendship, and in making possible timely and fascinating conversations like this one. The Perspectives Asia series explores contemporary culture, politics and society in our region, and sometimes it even touches upon sport. Tonight, we look to Brisbane's legacy strategy for the 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games. Our panel of expert and influential voices from diverse backgrounds will discuss how Australia can deepen its connections with the Asia-Pacific region, particularly in Oceania, through strategic partnerships, cultural exchange, and through leveraging opportunities in sport. This discussion seems particularly apt, given that when Brisbane hosts the 2032 Games, it will, in effect, also be staging them for and on behalf of the largely First Nations people of Oceania. This is mandated by the IOC to be a Games for both Brisbane and Oceania. As is set out in the Games legacy strategy, Elevate 2042, and I quote, Brisbane 2032 is a Games for all Oceania, which brings forward the opportunity to connect with First Nations peoples across the region and the world, to engage with their cultures, their languages and stories. My hope is that when the eventual establishment of Brisbane's First Nations Cultural Centre, or with its eventual establishment, that it, together with Quagoma, can be cornerstones of cultural welcome and celebration of contemporary Pacifica culture. We certainly hold the expertise and the collection through which to do so. Tonight, our panellists will provide valuable insights into how athletes, sport, universities and the government can foster meaningful and lasting ties across the region. The panel's moderator, Dr. Carolyn Riot, is Director of Games Partnerships and Engagement with Griffith University's Office of the Vice President for Industry and External Engagement. She leads the university's Brisbane 2032 Games legacy strategy by building impactful partnerships while continuing her Olympic movement research in high-performance sport and sport diplomacy, particularly in Oceania. Carolyn's pan-disciplinary approach to research focuses on elite athlete and coach development, parasport and women's well-being through sport and physical activity. Carolyn has previously worked with the Queensland Police Service, the Queensland Government's International Sport Unit, and with the International Olympic Committee as project lead for an internationally funded grant across 8 countries, and represented Australia at the International Olympic Academy Forums in Olympia, Greece. Please, would you welcome Caroline to introduce our esteemed panel and to lead tonight's discussion. Thank you.
Well, welcome everybody, and thank you so much, Chris, for that lovely introduction. That was a little bit long. I'll have to cut that bio back a little next time. But good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure to see you all here tonight, and thank you for joining us at this very important discussion that we will have this evening with our esteemed panellists from Paris to Brisbane. And there are a few of us on the panel that were in Paris at 2024, and really looking at the impact of the Games for the Asia-Pacific region. And actually, there's a few in the audience as well that I do know of. So it's a pleasure to have you here with us in terms of you bringing your own experiences of Paris 2024 to the table. I am Dr. Caroline Rio, and it's my pleasure to moderate this important discussion tonight, and hello to all of our online guests as well. But before we begin, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands on which we are meeting, and also acknowledge the beautiful welcome that you provided, Chris. This is a place of gathering, a place of education, and also storytelling, which we will draw on this evening. Tonight we'll take a look at how the Brisbane 2032 Games will shape and strengthen ties within the Asia-Pacific region, including Oceania. And indeed, the Brisbane 2032 Games has been declared as a Games for all of Oceania. So it's really important for us to make sure that we are delivering impacts and legacies for the whole of the region. So tonight we'll together discuss how the Games can impact the region and generate long-lasting legacies. And before we meet our panellists, I'd like to invite you also to participate in tonight's discussion by asking questions at the end of the panel, and also use the QR code on the next slide to share your thoughts on how the Games can leave a lasting legacy for the Asia-Pacific region, and also the role that you or your organisation can play in strengthening partnerships across Oceania. Please keep those questions in mind, and we'll post the QR code up again at the end for your input. But now to introduce our panellists. Our first panellist, Leata Alaimoana, of course, is the Queensland Trade Commissioner for the Pacific. Talofa Lava, Leata. She will discuss opportunities for Oceania in supply chain procurement and capability building, and much more. Next, we have Kerry Petersen, our Chief Impact Officer for the Brisbane 2032 Organising Committee. Kerry will touch on key observations from the Paris Games for legacy, and also what meaningful participation for Oceania in the legacy of the Games looks like, and the role of universities in regional development. Joining us as well is Adrine Monagi, an accomplished Papua New Guinean track and field athlete. She's also an aspiring business professional and current recipient of a business athletics scholarship at Griffith University through the Oceania Athletics Association, Griffith and Oceania Australia Foundation partnership, which she has described as a life-changing opportunity. Adrine will explore the role of sports in fostering regional partnerships and how athletes can contribute to legacy beyond the sporting arena. Finally, we're delighted to have Georgia-Leigh Vele is a first-time Olympian who swam the 50-metre freestyle at the Paris Games and was the flag bearer for Papua New Guinea at the opening ceremony. Georgia-Leigh will discuss her experiences as an athlete representing Papua New Guinea and how sports and education can inspire young athletes across the Pacific. So quite an extraordinary and inspirational lineup we have here tonight. So please join me in welcoming our panellists. Leata, we might start with you. We know how passionate you are, a passionate leader, really about empowering the Pacific Island communities and ensuring that their voices are heard and that their needs are met in the spaces that matter most. In your role as Queensland's Trade Commissioner to the Pacific, you're just about to head into a busy period of hospitality and tourism, with HOTEC 2024 being held in Fiji, the largest hospitality trade show event in the Pacific. So can you tell us a little bit about your role and how you see the Brisbane 2032 Games opening up new opportunities for Queensland and the region more broadly?
Okay, thanks for the question, Dr. Caroline. And I too want to acknowledge the First Nations people of the land on which we meet. And we do it because it's really close to the work that we do through Trade and Investment Queensland, because they are the first traders of this country. So I recognise that, acknowledge it and pay respect. But the work that we do at Trade and Invest Queensland, our mandate really is to help Queensland companies export out to the world and help attract investments into Queensland to help drive economic growth and economic development. I recently really came on board to help drive Queensland's trade strategy for the Pacific Islands. We've got 21 locations all over the world globally and 12 commissioners. I'm a bit unique on a couple of reasons, and one is I am based in Brisbane because of the proximity. A lot of people do are surprised when I say that we're sort of closer to PNG than we are to Melbourne if you're on a flight. I like catching that Cairns to Port Moresby flight because it's only an hour, 10 minutes, nice and easy. But the proximity, it's unique also because it's not transactional in some of the other markets that we operate in. It's very much about relationships, it's people to people. So when we're talking about Oceania, and I love coming to these sort of gatherings and opportunities to share more about the work that Trade and Investment Queensland, importantly because now more than ever, there's a spotlight in Oceania, there's a lot of work, we're engaging through various avenues, and for Brisbane 2032, it's that important around partnerships, and Chris mentioned that strategic partnerships. It's about listening, it's about learning. We're unique as well because whilst the mandate is about exporting out and investments in, for the Pacific, we recognise the importance around that listening piece, and it's important around two-way trade and investment. It's about that people to people and driving it. And so one of the first things I did when I came on board a year and a half ago was just two things. One was to go out and understand what is Queensland already doing in the Pacific, and two, do our goals and strategies align with those of the Pacific Island governments? And so I went out and met with all of them, and from it we sort of honed in and focused on the countries that made sense for Queensland, the ones that we can see as established, the ones that are emerging, and the ones that we can really have a look at some of these priority sectors. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, the work that we do. And then to hone it into the games and what the opportunities are, especially when you're asking me about supply chain procurement. Right now, you may be aware that there's, I think it's quoted at $200 billion in the infrastructure alone, or procurement, sorry, it should be across all the industries. The same as in the Pacific as well, that it's forecast around $4 billion in infrastructure over the next 5 years. It's going to go into the region. And what that's meant, there's been an incredible amount of investment, not just from Australia, but globally, in building up local content in the Pacific Islands. And so over the past couple of years, you're seeing a whole new generation of skill sets, a whole new generation of next gen coming through. So capability has grown, and it's exciting because that means that with these projects, it's sustainable. It's caring about the next gen. It's about the grandchildren. It's about, is this good for our country? So where we're seeing that, there's an opportunity, and right now we've got Queensland companies delivering infrastructure projects in the Pacific, for example, in partnership with the local companies, employing more in their upskilling. So I think the three things I really would focus on, if you're talking about Brisbane 2032, would be one, the infrastructure and the ability to leverage off and build that capability and opportunity on both sides. And also saying, we also, TAFE Queensland facilitates the Australia Pacific Trading Coalition, or APTC, that helps upskill. So you really need that foundation and educating piece around building up into those industries. And we've got Queensland companies now from far north Queensland who are doing projects in Papua New Guinea, Vanuatu, and Fiji, working with local content, and now talking about, well, as we know that there's a bit of a shortage in that type of work, that we'll have that ability for them to do work there, come over and get some skills here, and then be able to capacity build and do that two-way relationship piece that then goes back, and are able to maintain this infrastructure that's going into the Pacific way beyond when it's established. The second part I wanted to talk about is sports. It's Brisbane 2032, and the ecosystem around it, and the opportunities around supporting sport through technology, research, coach to coach, governance, and all the aspects around that. I think there's a really good opportunity. Sorry, my brother here is playing rugby over there. He's doing more in the space there. He's coming over here, getting experience, being able to take that back. And again, it's that people-to-people relationship. But you're upskilling and capacity building on both sides. That's going to be that legacy piece long after 2032 as well. And then the other one is furthering that people to people, and Chris touched on it as well, is the First Nations connections. So now more than ever, there's the shared values around our First Nations companies. We've got 2 in Queensland that have signed partnerships in the Solomon Islands and in Fiji. They just work well together. We work well together. So being able to leverage that. So we say hand on heart that Brisbane 2032 is about the Oceania. we are actually listening. We're powering forward on two fronts, and there's those opportunities, I think, as infra. I think is the sort of low-hanging fruit, if you put it that way. The sports piece around the whole ecosystem, not just the running, but the support of it, and then the people-to-people links. And then I just wanted to end and talk about the business capacity, but also how it's going to be the most inclusive games, or we're striving towards that, and maybe Kerry would talk more about that. And there's ability there too that we can share the capacity and the capabilities that we've got as a state. I always talk about Queensland. Madeline's here from DFAT. Madeline has recently come on board to help drive the Pacific work for DFAT. So we work really closely around the Team Australia piece. But that capacity build, I think, now in the Pacific is starting to move and shift. I'm very proud. 10, 15 years ago, I know some of you lived there or have lived in the Pacific. It wasn't that inclusive, whereas now that's moving forward, and I think that's some really good opportunities around that piece as well. So, yeah, I think overall, all the things that underpin this, that move it forward, especially in the private sector, and that business to business is what's going to help shift that regional growth and economy development for us. Probably gone on
Brilliant.
a bit too long.
It's such an exciting time when we're hearing our Trade Commission to the Pacific hit on all that hard infrastructure stuff, but also the people-to-people pieces that are so important when we're looking at using the games as a catalyst to create this thriving sport, arts and culture outcome, if you like, from the games from 2032. So thank you, Leata.
Yeah,
that was really fabulous. Kerry, over to you. And talking about living in the Pacific, as Chief Impact Officer, though, we'll start with your role and responsibilities, if we could, and then we'll move into some other exciting questions.
Sure. So thank you, everyone, and great to be here. My role, Chief Impact Officer, not quite where I started on it, but it's. I looked up who else is the Chief Impact Officer in the world. I found Prince Harry has that title as well. So, but my responsibilities in the organising committee is impact, legacy, sustainability, government relations, and really focusing on Paralympic impact. So really making sure we maximise impact from hosting the Paralympics. Excellent. And so I'm one of the C-suite in our team, which has got about 30 people in our organisation at the moment. It will probably grow to thousands, 2,000, 3,000, maybe 4,000 by the Games, but we're only 30 at the moment.
Wow, we're going to need a whole new building, just like they have in Paris, right? So I know you'd agree that Paris 2024 was an exceptional and outstanding experience, and you were part of the official observer program that was run by the International Olympic Committee in Paris. Can you share with us a little bit about what that program was like, and also some of the key Paris learnings that you've brought back home already? And I'm sure there's plenty more to be learning over time.
We're actually pulling all our reports together at the moment, and to put it in some key themes. And so I'm busy. I've got so many different meetings and presentations, so I have got a few really thinking of what were the big key themes, because there were so many learnings. The Observer program is where future hosts, the Paris 24 have to run a program called the Observer program, and they work closely with the IOC and the key functional area leads. And so all the future hosts joined that program. So Milano Cortina was there, LA was there, the new hosts that have just won, and our government partners as it related to their role as well. So it's really great to meet the others. I went to Beijing 22 for that Observer program, and a lot of people said, but that's a Winter Games. Actually, the communications, the venues, the transport, the security, it's actually the same. The fields of play, it's sort of sun and beach, but snow. But so much of it is actually the same. So I focused my time on the Observer program, focused around the legacy program sort of initiatives, and my team were there as well on sustainability programs, energy programs. But a couple of key learnings. Their legacy projects really aligned to the Games. So one of the words were Games Wide Open or Games for All. And that was, you could see the focus in their projects was really relating to that. There was a commitment to legacy funding. That's an important thing for the partners and the government partners at the moment. You actually need funding to drive change, and funding over and above BAU. And there was funding, a commitment from the organising committee, from the government partners, and then from commercial partners as well. And the Paris programs, Paris used the Games as a catalyst to drive change, but the context was important. It was change for what Paris needed and Paris region needed. They had a program, Move More, Bouger, more, whatever it was in French, 30 minutes of exercise a day for kids. Our kids, I think, are pretty active within our school system, whereas that wasn't the case for Paris. They did a range of projects that I think that the learning there was context is important. Just because they did it doesn't mean it's going to be the right project for us. They also set up some social and economic frameworks to really maximise local impact. We know we need to do the same around businesses, social purpose businesses, inclusion, and expanding the opportunities to the broader region, both Queensland region, Australia and Oceania. Some of the cities, so they had the City of Paris, the City of Saint-Denis, and they really got behind the programs. I don't know whether you saw it, but Saint-Denis had the village and a new pool and branding, and you could just feel they planned early, they collaborated well with the organising committee, and you could really feel the outcomes. Yep. And to that point, the legacy co-branding was something that was really important. Another learning was, the athletes are the stars of the show. I mean, we have to remember it's a sports event, and we have to make sure the Olympians and the Paralympians enjoy it. And probably there were lots of others, but we need to play to our strengths. So while we were sitting in those amazing venues, looking at the Eiffel Tower and all the amazing landmarks and watching the footage, as I'm sure many of you did, we were sitting there thinking, wow, we don't have an Eiffel Tower, but then we think about our landscape. They didn't have whales passing over the winter, past Minjerribah and all that sort of thing at the same time, and the reef up the road, and they can come for the games and then, expand our tourism opportunity or into the Pacific. Yeah. So we know that we have to use our strengths, and it will be different. It won't be the same as Paris. So, play to our strengths was something we really thought
Absolutely.
need to think about.
I think that's a really important message about context being very relevant, but also that notion of building bridges. So in Saint-Denis, you saw actual physical new bridges being built so that people could access green spaces and get into the swimming pool venues and so on and learn how to swim for the very first time. So it's really quite special. And then also that strong message around iconic landmarks and, reaching out into the Pacific and what the Pacific has to offer is really quite exciting. You do have a strong affinity with the Pacific, though, having spent some time in Vanuatu, grown up in Vanuatu, and going back to the bid days. Can you tell us a little bit about the aspirations at that time and why should we be getting excited for the region when it comes to Brisbane hosting the Games?
I was saying I grew up in Vanuatu, so I had the most amazing childhood and was sent back to boarding school at age 12 in Melbourne. It was a shock to the system of wearing shoes and blazers and ties, and so I had the most idyllic childhood. I took my adult kids back to Vanuatu last Christmas because they'd never been and I wanted them to share where I grew up. It's a special place in my heart. I think, there's lots of opportunities that we have to work on moving forward, and we have to think about where we're going to focus and what we're going to do. What were you asking me about the Paris?
Yeah, I was just thinking, it's sort of like, why should Oceania get so excited?
That's right. So the bid. Yeah. And so I was involved in the bid as well. Sorry, I was too busy thinking about Vanuatu. I was involved in the bid. I just finished the Commonwealth Games, actually leading the government team, and I had a career in government. And the government came and said, should we host Brisbane 2032? What should we do? A large amount of work had been done by the Council of Mayors, so I always pay credit to the work that they did. But we needed to think about the legacy, the budget, what the opportunities was, what was the value proposition and why should we do this and what were the opportunities. Fast forward to, COVID, past COVID, putting the bid in, and lucky enough I was in Tokyo, so I led the bid team, a huge collaboration effort with all the levels of government and the AOC and PA, very complex in 12 weeks, but anyway, we got there, got to Tokyo. It was amazing being in the room for the announcement. But I just remember meeting the Papua New Guinea IOC member, the Vanuatu IOC member, the New Zealand IOC member, and they were so excited because they felt like it was their games, because they know probably they won't be able to host the games on their own. They won't be. Yeah. But they felt like it was their games, and you could feel that excitement. And right from that moment of winning and meeting them at functions and events, and I've kept in touch and we keep seeing them again in Paris. It definitely made me realise, and the commitment, as you mentioned, Chris, in the bid, how can we involve our neighbours, whether it's through employment, whether it's through leveraging trade opportunities, through procurement, volunteers. There's so many programs and there's going to be so many opportunities, and not only in our organising committee but in the hospitality industry. We know it will be a real challenge across every aspect. We'll be crazy not to share that experience.
It's excellent that you're starting to really think about that deep and meaningful role that the Games will have for Oceania when it comes to participation and representation. So the volunteering piece, the employment piece, we're quite excited about supporting you in that area too. Adrine, over to you. A lot of tonight's discussion is really about sport being an important diplomatic tool. We're starting to kind of build on that theme of how sport can help build strong relations. Now, as an athlete from PNG, Papua New Guinea, studying in Australia, how do you think sports can strengthen partnerships and foster connections between Australia and the broader Oceania region, particularly in the lead up to the Games?
Thank you. Sports plays a significant role in building and strengthening partnership, especially between Australia and the broader Oceania region in the lead up to the 2032 Brisbane Games. As an athlete from Papua New Guinea, studying in Australia, sports can foster deeper regional connections. Here's how sports can contribute. I got 2 points. 1, regional development and talent exchange. Sports provide a platform for countries in the Oceania to collaborate on talent development programs, exchange expertise, and share resources. Australia, with its well-established sporting infrastructure, can mentor emerging talent from neighbouring Pacific nations like PNG and others, creating pathways for athletes to excel on the world stage. Here's an example. I was one of the athletes that was here during the 2018 Commonwealth Games, preparing for the Games. It was good to prepare closer to home. This exchange fosters long-term partnerships beyond competition, promoting regional development in both sports and socio-economic areas. The second point will be cultural diplomacy, and people-to-people connection is one of the panels that mentioned. Sports fosters a transit border, uniting people through shared goals and experiences. Events such as the Brisbane 2032 Games can catalyse people-to-people connection across Oceania, helping build mutual understanding and respect by hosting pre-games training camps or regional tournaments. A good example would be I was one of the athletes that was preparing for the 2024 Paris Games. Unfortunately, I did not meet that qualifying standard. Australia can engage its Pacific neighbours in a shared sporting narrative, promoting cross-cultural ties.
Fantastic. And we've seen that through the GAPS camps as well that we've held here for many years at the Gold Coast from 2016 onwards. That cultural exchange is probably the most enriching experience I think that many of the athletes and coaches have. So you've articulated that very nicely for us. And at each Olympic and Paralympic Games, the Athletes Commission is elected, which gives athletes a voice, of course, in the Olympic movement for a term of about 8 years. And I know that you're keen, Adrine, to bring change for all Pacific athletes, Melanesians, Polynesians and Micronesians, and have their voices heard because they face a lot of challenges around selection policies, around access to sports science and medicine services, facilities, coaching, the list goes on. So in terms of athletes as ambassadors for regional legacy, with your diverse experiences in international competitions and also your academic focus, how do you see athletes like yourself contributing to the development of sport in the Pacific?
Promoting integrity and transparency, that's one. Mm-hmm. 2, bridging communities by closing the gaps by providing thoughtful insights into how to execute a strategy within a country to improve outcomes, especially in sports. Most importantly, you're working within the reality and scope of the country rather than out of the scope. 3, leadership in policy discussion. Policy needs to be regularly reviewed to address ongoing changes in the sports environment. I think I have one more. Strategies and guidelines to ensure compliance with regulations. Athletes and coaches have avenues to report if not abided by without fear, and athletes and coaches to be able to contribute in advisory roles as they are at the coil phase and impacted mostly by any actions or lack of it.
Fantastic. Athletes have such a strong voice, and the power that they can show through leadership to impact and create change through policy. You use that word. Policy imperatives, I think, is quite remarkable. So thank you for sharing that. And over to our fantastic Georgia-Leigh. You're a rising talent in high-performance sports. Can I just say, we've just shifted from athletics to swimming now, so we might get some different perspectives. But really fabulous. I also need to acknowledge, of course, the Griffith Sports College, who has brought both of our young athletes here to us today. But also say, and to share with those of you who don't know, that Griffith student athletes contributed to 34% of Australia's medal tally at the Olympics and 18% of Australia's medal tally at the Paralympics. So we're in some good company here. Can you share with us, what was one of your big takeaways from Paris 24?
Oh, I just think the atmosphere that an Olympics can bring was the biggest thing for me. I've been to big swimming events, big rugby events, but nothing has ever compared to what I felt at the Olympics, whether it was in the swimming pool, in our training pool, or just walking around Paris. It was something completely out of this world. So cool.
Yeah, it's really hard to kind of share it and sort of beyond with all the words of description, I guess.
Yeah.
And some of us that were in the Olympic Village for a day, you know, we could feel that energy as well around those athletes. So it was quite fabulous to see you there in action. But in terms of sporting legacy and regional engagement, now you've represented Papua New Guinea in multiple international events. Yeah. You're a double silver medalist at the 2024 Oceania Swimming Championships in the women's and the mixed 4x100 freestyle relay. So how do you see your role as an athlete in promoting greater engagement and also cultural exchange between Papua New Guinea and Australia, for example, as we head towards 2032?
I think just generally being a Pacific Islander in Australia and training here, that's already engaging the cultures. I wear my Papua New Guinean culture on my sleeve, and wherever I go, that's who I am. So when I'm at training, when people ask who do I swim for, or at competitions, because it won't say my club name, it'll say Papua New Guinea, that's a question that people always ask. So I think automatically that is a cultural exchange. But I think being able to speak on it from an athlete's point of view rather than like a management side gives you a more like personable sort of thing. Like you speak to other athletes from Australia and what they have experienced is completely different to what a Pacific Islander would have experienced. And like Adrine said, we've both come here for our training. So our whole growing up and upbringing and how we started in our sports is, you can't even compare it to like what most of the athletes here have experienced. But yeah, I just think as an athlete, it just gives you a different point of view than if you're in sort of management area.
Sure. So it's really interesting because I know that you've spoken a lot about how you've balanced your high performance sports sort of training and competitions with your academic achievements. And now looking forward to the future, and you have your family here tonight as well, and thinking about family life and how you bring all of that together. A lot of athletes use their platforms to inspire others to get involved in sport or to pursue different sort of avenues in their lives. So could you just talk to us a little bit about that and sort of how you work to support younger athletes in the region to enhance their educational opportunities?
Yeah, well, firstly, sports is not a forever career, and especially not swimming or even athletics isn't a professional career. We don't get paid to do it. So education is vital. Otherwise, what's your stepping stone past retirement? And I just think having gone through Griffith, especially with that support from the sports college, I was able to really harness my education while not leaving my sports behind, and vice versa. And especially like with GAPS, you guys touched on, I wasn't an athlete at GAPS, but because of my education at Griffith, I actually volunteered at 2 GAPS camps. And so I used my degree and actually applied it, but for Pacific Islanders. And I think that was really special for me, that especially around the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games, which I didn't make, I was still able to help out and be a part of the whole process and really foster our athletes, giving them as much help and assistance that they could get to be the best they could be at the Com Games here.
Yeah, 100%. I think actually a lot of what you're talking about is around local knowledge and sharing that sort of through those cultural and exchange sort of opportunities. And so, Leata, when we do talk about local knowledge and capability building, one of our Griffith Games strategic imperatives is actually to achieve greater participation of Pacifica peoples' culture and knowledge in game settings through the regional collaboration. So in terms of capability building, I know you touched on it a little bit in the region, but can you just sort of harness a little bit more around some of those opportunities that you see for sustainable development?
Yeah, I probably did touch on a bit of it, but I think there's really great opportunity around the capability building. And some of the examples too is that capacity building, two-way trade, or two-way training, I should say. I'll give you an example is the recent, and we've made a whole of government commitment to support ONOC in the build-up. So that doesn't mean Brisbane 2032, just 2032. It's also to the next Pacific Games, it's to LA, it's to the next PAC Games, and then it's Brisbane 2032. And so it is sometimes funny when they think about it so far away, when really it's not, it's pretty close. Kerry probably feels it closer than I do. But the last PAC Games, there's amazing infrastructure that's in Honiara at the moment, or Souls, you know. So you imagine if there's those opportunities around capacity building, capability building both ways, it gives a bit more opportunity. And as Georgia-Leigh mentioned, it's in our DNA to help each other and to share. And I love the work that the fellow sisters are doing here, because you can be what you see, you know. And so it inspires in that way, but it's also this, you didn't have to do that, but she decidedly say, I'm going to go and help. I'm not involved, but I'm still going to go and help and do that sort of stuff. So I think building in that, and then where there's the gaps and the work that you do, Caroline, and being able to build those gaps, strengthen them, harness them, and have that two-way capacity building capability is really important in that sports ecosystem. And then for 2032, again, I touched on it before, across those sectors, hospitality just reminded me, that stuff comes naturally to us. We do it all the time. So to be able to go there and share it is another way of sharing where we're from as Pacific Islanders through hosting and helping. That's where they can come across, where the Pacific Islanders can come and generally be involved, whether it's be volunteer or support, or that exchange around governance and policy. These guys are advocates for it as well. So in the lead up to the games, local content coming over and that information exchange, that helps deepen, again, that people to people. I always refer to people to people because of that, helps deepen to the next level. But again, it's that legacy piece, it's the impact, it's sustainable long after the games, into that work that then helps drive, social impact across the Pacific Islands, but also here too. So hopefully I didn't get into
I love it. This is just so much. I love this topic. Get ready for questions, because I'm going to ask the audience to participate in a moment. But before that, I just want to touch on what you were talking about there, because I think the partnerships piece and the role of universities is really important. We are anchor institutions. We're here to stay. So after the games, when the organising committee gets dissolved or priorities of government might change, universities will still be here. And alongside our partners, I think we have a critical role to play in delivering those ongoing benefits and legacies into the future. So Jackie Lauf is here from Sport Matters and also the Oceania National Olympic Committee. She works very closely with ONOC. And I know that in Fiji last year, so we went to the ONOC conference. Were you there, Kerry? I think you came along to that one. No, not that one. But we spoke a lot about building capacity of universities in the Pacific, so working with the National University of Samoa, working with a very young Tongan university as well. So it's really important for us to be thinking about that landscape for capability building and education pathways as well into sport. So quite exciting. So Kerry, that brings me to a question for you. What did you see the role of universities to be in the lead up to Brisbane 2032, knowing, of course, that we've got the Queensland University Games Engagement Committee group together as well?
So I think that the engagement committee is great, because there's a lot of interest, which is great, but it's harnessing that interest and having a bit of a coordinated approach to the interest, so that we're sort of sharing those opportunities. 8 years, it sort of is a long time in some people's language and others not, but if you think about students doing a degree that might be leaving school now, wanting to go to university and then be well positioned for a job in 2025, or 2030. So the universities can really look at what our needs are. In fact, the whole industry's needs are. The organising committee, we're effectively a startup, and as employee number, I think my number's 3. It's one, we all sign, the 3 of us sign contracts, and it gets down to the time of the email. But I was there with the first 3 of us. So it's literally a startup with Excel spreadsheets and trying to get all the information. We build up into a couple of thousand people and we shut the door. And days after, we're getting all these emails at the moment from the Paris team saying, here's our private emails. If you ever want questions, please don't hesitate to share the knowledge and the learnings. Not necessarily looking for jobs, but just because they did such a great job, they're proud of what they did, and they want to pay it forward. But the universities, from a training, whether it's volunteer training, whether it's studies or projects, I think there's a huge amount of opportunity, and we know the students are really interested. We're looking at the benefits measurement exercise. There's lots of projects that are there, so why not harness all the great minds, but also in terms of training, not only for Brisbane 2032 jobs, but industry jobs and sector jobs. The hospitality industry, tourism industry. I was thinking slightly going to another point, but we want people... The comment I got when you said in Paris you're from Australia, and I travelled for a couple of weeks, a break in between the Paralympics, and was back for that. We were in Norway, and they said, oh my goodness, you've come Australia. How have you come? That's so far away. We can't even think about going that far. People will come that far, but there's an opportunity when they come, because they think it is the end of the earth, come for the games, but then stay and experience the rest of the country and experience Oceania. Surely there's an opportunity there for travel and tourism to extend. Because they really think it's, everyone knows that's travelled, they think Australia's so far away. Yeah. You probably found it with the other athletes when you said, where are you from?
Oh, yeah. When I said that I travelled 3 days to get there and others travelled 3 hours.
Yes, exactly.
A stark difference.
So I think there's a real opportunity because, and I think that showcasing opportunity, the broadcast and the vision, we saw what we saw in Paris. Wait till they see our road race, up at Mooloolaba along the beach, and it will be different. But I hope it will have a lasting impact, and people will go home and say, oh my goodness, we had the most amazing time, tell friends and family, and just, people want to come.
And did you get a more comfortable bed because you travelled for 3 days?
No. It wasn't actually that bad, though. I will say the beds weren't as bad as they seemed.
Oh, that's good to know. Good to know. Well, thank you so much. I think there's a lot of really great content that we've heard tonight. I will, while you're thinking of that question, looking for a hand, I will also mention that, of course, we have those strong partnerships that you were talking about. When I think about Jackie's work with Sport Matters, universities, in terms of those partnerships, have also helped to develop national sport policies. So we, put together the Palau first ever national sport policy, which was launched post Paris 24. So it's really exciting to sort of see those impacts. Tess, do we have a microphone at all, or no? That's okay. You just need to yell out. Thank you so much.
My name's Tess Newton-King. Thank you to everyone for your presentations. And Adrine, it's good to see you again. I think the last time I saw you was over a screen. So I guess I have a double-barreled question. One is a kind of beginning and one is an ending. So in terms of what's going on now and what we can expect in the next little while around the organising, I'd be keen to know how Pacific voices and thinking is being included in that. So how are Pacific Island countries, whether it's Vasanok or Onoka or whatever, being included in the conversations that are going on now, because they are the ones, that's what's going to underpin what comes further on. And then in terms of the legacy, bearing in mind that the legacy will take a number of forms through from hard infrastructure across others, I'd like to know what the plan is for how that legacy will, what's the slice that the Pacific gets of that legacy, whether it's hard infrastructure or other things. And I do have a cheeky third question, which is a bit of
No, you're not allowed to have a third one. That's for afterwards.
Which is what you've said has presumed a lot, and Leata, we've talked about this previously, about the people-to-people things. It's based on a presumption of everybody can move around as freely as they would like, and that is not the case. So I'd be keen to know how, if at all, this opportunity can be used to improve what we know is the really atrocious state of freedom of movement for people from the Pacific to Australia.
Great questions, Tess. Who wants to make a start?
You can start.
You might join me. So in terms of inclusion in the planning at the moment, as I said, we are a startup, so we're pretty much doing our foundational organisational planning. It's sort of boring, a bit of boring stuff, but it's really building the team, the organisational strategy. One of them is our strategy is, the vision is we want to make sure our stakeholders feel it was worth it. And our stakeholders, there's 8 groups, but the National Olympic Committees, the National Paralympic Committees, which includes all the Pacific Olympic Committees, we want to consult and we want to hear. We haven't done that yet, but we want, well, what would make it worth it for them? Like, we need to communicate. We haven't done that yet, but that's what we're working on, because if we're going to have a games, we don't want to say we're going to be the best and the biggest games, because we want to just get it right and make it right for us, make it right for our context, and make sure our communities feel it's worth it. So we've got some communication to do to really hear that. If we don't ask people and, connect, we won't know, and we can't presume. But we know we need our government partners. So the organising committee, we've got a key to put on the event, but I think we need the broader partners from the government, the part of the Elevate strategy that you mentioned. Look at funding. We're not responsible for permanent infrastructure, but, how do we develop training facilities, and how do we have sport exchange and those programs? It's probably not the organising committee, but and we don't have a government people here, but that's definitely something that, needs to be done and considered. Otherwise, we won't get the benefit.
Kerry, and I might add to that, because that's absolutely right, but it's also the in the sports space, the Australian Olympic Committee and Paralympics Australia, they're working very closely with ONOC and other groups and OPC to sort of build out that narrative around, okay, so what is it that we're looking at collectively?
Yeah.
So there is that support network.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that I think that the role that we do as well is really around that government to government and getting it. So ONOC definitely is the avenue. That's what we've been hearing. That's what I hear when I go around, and there's the Samoa Olympics, there's Vanuatu and so forth, that they come together under ONOC, and then the different sports that are involved to feed into this. That goes into PAC Games and the next ones, and also into Brisbane 2032 and beyond. And it's interesting because it's changed in country in the Pacific. Now more than ever, with the generations that are here at the moment and where they're striving to be more included, to get more, there's a different kind of mindset as well. And so now it's more open around policy change and government, and it's a different type of era that we're in. The communications are different, so people are getting called out differently as well, and owning it. So, and communicating. So when before ONOC it was probably hard to communicate, whereas now you can jump on a Teams meeting, or we do things. Kerry touched too about how in between the games there's an opportunity. They're already being proactive. Fiji Tourism have come to me saying, hey, we know the British Lions are playing there. What are they doing in between games? Because we want to bring them over to Fiji. So that probably 10, 15 years ago wasn't as collaborative, or not as proactive, where you're seeing that level of proactive across all the different levels that are leveraging off sports. And I always talk that we use sports to leverage trade and investment, but now it's leveraging across all the different industries that are there that I think will really be key to beyond, that impact and legacy piece. Most of the projects, or most of the work that happens in the Pacific Islands, has a social impact on someone, somewhere, so all across it. So that's something that we will keep working on from the side that we do. But government to government is so important. And to your third question, Madeline's here from DFAT, go ask her. No, I'm kidding. I'm not going to throw her into it. But it's complex. We're not going to lie, I'm not going to be honest. And there's things in the realm of what state government can do. There's things in the realm of what federal government can do. We're seeing our local governments being a bit proactive and advocating, but all together, we advocate for change and positive change, and listening and advocating for it. There's things in the realm that's of the Pacific Island governments as well. So that government to government piece is really important for that third question. There's no easy solution, but there has to be moving forward and progress, and I think it's not going to happen overnight, but we all strive to do our piece and our part in it as well.
And I think the another example, and I'm sure your role models when you go back home, and it's great for the hosts or the cities to have you as role models. But I look at the Commonwealth Games, we're talking about the Gold Coast and the volleyball team that was sponsored, and I think that was the first medal ever won for Vanuatu. And those girls must be rock stars when they go home, but the other kids see them and want to, it creates a flow-on effect.
Yeah.
But that was through support, but conscious support, targeted support. So I think the sports bodies, the governments, the councils, the universities really all need to take the opportunity to bring the, athletes in to this.
And that talks to your earlier point about commitment to funding for legacy as well. So that's really, really vital. One more question, and before I ask that person to ask their question, we've got the QR code up here as well for your call to action. If you have anything else that you'd like to add, would be fabulous. So over to the gentleman in the middle here. Thank you so much.
I can recall a gentleman for quite a while.
What would you like me to know? It's okay.
Collaboration is obviously one of the key things coming forward. I'm just wondering, and I have no idea what the answer to this is, will any of the events for the Games be held in the Pacific, or will they be held in southeastern Queensland?
Sorry, Kerry.
No,
I've been closest to the
at the
sport
moment. It's mostly southeast Queensland, but then there's some rugby, I think, football actually in Townsville and Cairns. Some preliminaries in Sydney and Melbourne, nothing in the Pacific at this point in time.
I think in Tahiti last.
Yeah. They had the surfing, didn't they, in Tahiti?
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
When I mentioned about being proactive, there's been quite a few, though, too, have approached, and I know they were talking to Ona about having the training camps in there, in the Pacific, and then coming over.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
there is a bit of talk around that in the proactive space. Oh, Stephen's here from IDK, who was instrumental in NFL and flags coming on as Olympic sport down the track as well. But things like that as well, where the Pacific go, we're into NFL, how can we, or do we, there's quite a bit of attraction in there in like American Samoa, Tonga, Fiji and so forth, and then saying, well, why don't we try and attract them and start training and then going into to that. So,
and there's probably more attention that's going to be on the Pacific Games and the mini games into the future as well, and there might be some opportunities there for others to participate in those events. Mini games in Palau. Did you want to mention something, Jackie?
I just wanted to ask another question.
Yes, okay, you're allowed. Yes, one more.
Okay, just to finish with the perspectives from the athletes. Because there's a lot of focus on winning, there's a lot of focus on those who get the media attention participating at games. There's a long trajectory between now and 2032. A lot of people are going to have aspirations, and they're going through talent ID in every country right now. That includes Asia and the Pacific. Both athletes in your presentations tonight in the panel mentioned examples where you didn't make the team and you didn't get to the games for the Commonwealth and for the Paris Olympics. And there's a meet about the impact that sport can have on individuals, and that piece around resilience. And I wanted to ask you what your key learnings from those experiences were, and what's your advice to aspiring athletes, wherever they may live, in their trajectory and their vision and their dreams for 2032?
Good question. Okay, how should I start? I didn't think I would make it to 2024 Paris, but I had hope. The funding that came through Pacific Oz was helpful, and I thought, okay, let me just try. The last meet that I had was at the Oceania Championships, and that would determine whether or not I would qualify. I was close to qualifying, but I fell short. I kind of realized that I was capable of being up there with the Australians. The Australians are top in hurdles. And I'm the only good hurdler in the Pacific region from Papua New Guinea. And when I saw that I came fourth in the hurdles, I realized that I could qualify on merit. And that would happen in the next Olympics in 2028. So then I took it as a learning curve for me. And I told myself that I'm definitely going to make it in 2028. And yeah, never see yourself short you can always reach your goals.
Okay, it's really hard to back up on Adrine's response there. But I think in agreement with her, it's a learning curve, and it's not easy to not make it ever, but it's what you do from that point on that actually makes a difference, or at least for me, missing out on Com Games and then Tokyo, my biggest progression in swimming was post-Tokyo, and that was because I knew that I wasn't done and I wasn't going to give up, and I just had to keep going. And I think that same mindset's now been applied to everything in my life. And even just being in Paris, I was so nervous going into my race, but I was like, no, you've overcome everything else to get here. You deserve it. So you go with the flow, and if you've got the means to continue on after missing out on something, I see it as a why not? And if you've got the support and help like we both have gotten from Australia, you may as well make the most of that.
Well, we're so proud of you, and what a wonderful way to end this evening's discussion with the voices of our athletes. You're the reason why we're here, and the reason why we're having these great opportunities presented to us and for the whole of Oceania. So what a wonderful way. Please join me in thanking our panellists this evening. And I'd like to hand over to Gloria. Thanks, Gloria. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, as we draw this enlightening panel discussion to a close, it's really my privilege to extend a heartfelt vote of thanks on behalf of Griffith Asia Institute. First and foremost, I would like to extend our sincere gratitude to our established panel speakers, Leata, Kerry, Adrine, and Georgia-Leigh, and our moderator, Caroline, for this evening. Your insights and expertise have not only enriched our understanding, but have also made us really to think critically about the Brisbane 2032 Games and the long-lasting legacy for the Asia-Pacific. I would also like to say thanks to Chris and your team and the team's generous support for the event. Your commitment for fostering dialogue and learning in our community has made this event possible. To all the participants which took time to join us today, thank you for your active engagement and thoughtful questions. I have a son. He is an aspiring tennis player. So the discussion and all the questions all speak to me and really touch me. Yeah. A special thanks to our center manager, Chantel, and the volunteers whose hard work behind the scene makes this evening very smoothly. Your dedication and attention to detail haven't gone unnoticed. In closing, I encourage everyone to take the knowledge gained today back to your respective role and think your role in strengthening the partnership across Asia Pacific. Let us continue the conversation sparked here and active strive toward enhancing the positive change. Thank you once again for being here today, and safe travel home, and I look forward to seeing you in our future events. Thank you.